Right, we're now looking at part one of the question, which was 20 marks to discuss and measure the recognition of the software costs as possibly an intangible asset in terms of IAS 38. As I said, it's 20 marks, which is quite a lot of writing and can be a little bit tricky. And to be honest, students often find theory questions a little bit challenging. But because there's quite a lot to be discussed here, you should be able to earn your 20 marks quite easily. So two things to focus on. The first part is focus on the definition of an intangible asset. In other words, does the software costs meet the definition of an intangible asset? Break the definition down into its components. So separately identifiable, without physical substance, how it's going to generate future economic benefits, and does it have a cost that can be measured? Once you've done that and concluded that it does meet the definition of an intangible asset, then you need to talk about, does it meet the requirements for capitalization as an internally generated intangible asset, i.e. development costs. And remember that there's 6 requirements in order to capitalize, in this instance, software costs as development in terms of an intangible asset. All 6, so it's not just 5, all 6 of the components have to be met, and if all 6 are met, then you can conclude, yes, the software costs meet the definition of an intangible, internally generated intangible asset. And then the last part of the question is just to work out the numbers, which were quite straightforward, no complex calculations, but just figure out the numbers that were given, where are they going to be disclosed. So if we look at the solution, okay, opening paragraph, little bit of background. Always introduce what you are talking about in any theory question. So it's kind of like setting the stage to what you're about to talk about, okay? So a little opening paragraph, normally worth 1 or 2 marks, and it's just unpacking what you are going to talk about. So, the development of the application software commenced on 16 December. If the development costs meet the definition of an IA and meet the requirements of IAS 38 for recognition of internally generated intangibles, then the amounts incurred may be capitalized as development costs. So you're very clearly telling the examiner, I know what I'm talking about. It could be an intangible asset, and it could be an internally generated intangible asset. Both of those points need to be separately addressed because they both have separate criteria for recognition. If the amounts incurred do not meet the requirements of IAS 38 for capitalization, what do we do with it? Well, then we have to expense it as development costs in P&L. Okay, so that's kind of the introduction to what you're about to talk about. So now let's move on specifically to the criteria to recognize an item as an intangible asset. Focus on the definition of an intangible asset. So the definition of an intangible asset is an asset that is separately identifiable, it's got no physical substance, and it is expected to generate future economic benefits to the entity. It must also have a cost that can be reliably measured. So if I take that definition, break it down into components, I'm then going to answer the question in the context of each component. You'll see in my answer that I didn't put down the specific definition, I just broke it down into the components. But if you wanted to, you could put down the definition first and then answer each of the components as well. You may get a few more marks that way. So the first one, separately identifiable. They tell you clearly that the software can be operated on any computer used by other water bottling plants. In other words, that's telling you that this software is not specific to this asset. It's not part of the asset. It is separately identifiable because we could take it and use it on another plant. Okay? The software is therefore separately identifiable. Is it without physical substance? Yes, I think you all understand that software is always without physical substance. The computer is the hardware, the software is the IA with no physical substance. How is it going to generate future economic benefits? So are future economic benefits expected to flow to the entity? Now again, remember when we were reading the paragraph about the software, we highlighted the fact that it's going to allow the plant to operate more efficiently and therefore generate additional profit. Quite simply, that is how the software is going to develop future economic benefits. Right, the third part of the definition is future economic benefits. How is the software going to generate future economic benefits? Now, we've already said that the software drives the computers that operate the plant, and the question clearly told us that the software is going to allow the plant to operate more efficiently, thereby generating greater profits going forward. So that is exactly how the software is going to generate future economic benefits. And lastly, can the cost be measured? The question clearly told us that CompSoft is going to bill us for time and travel. So the cost can very easily be identified. So, does the software meet the definition of the intangible asset? Yes, it does.